As Prime Minister Narendra Modi completes 1 year in office, we are here to discuss all that he's done right and all that he's got wrong. With me, I have a panel. I have from the BJD, Panda, from the BJP, Subramanian, Swamy. I have Vir Sanghvi, political analyst. I have Manish Tewari from the Congress. Before we begin, Veer, can you give us the editorial report card of the Modi government?
Oh gosh, I'm not sure I'm the right person to, but I think there is no one report card for the Modi government. You have to understand, given the magnitude of his mandate, there were at least 3 different categories of people who voted for him. There were hardcore Hindutva people who supported his rise within the BJP.
One of them sitting next to you.
One of them perhaps being Dr. Swamy. There were people who believed in him because they believed he was a visionary, a man who would do things, who would get the economy moving. And then there was the vast undecided who looked at the Congress, looked at the campaign it fought, looked at the record of UPA 2 and decided Modi was the best bet. If you look at them now, my sense is that the Hindutva guys are probably the most disappointed, because there's a sense that Modi has sold out. He's become part of what they call the Lachan's elite and therefore has abandoned their agenda. The guys who wanted him to reform the economy and do things and change India are a little disappointed because there have been no big bang reforms. But the bulk of that constituency, which is the ordinary person, looks at Modi and says, okay, he's not been great, but is there an alternative? So I think overall, Modi's support base is intact. But when the problems come, they won't come from the opposition. They'll come from the people Dr. Swamy represents, who will say, where is our temple? Where is the Hindutva agenda? This is what we wanted you to do.
Dr. Swamy, do you agree with
Well,
it?
surprisingly, I broadly agree with him.
That's a surprise. That's a first.
There were we analyzed, some of us who analyzed this thought there were 3 factors in our victory. One was, of course, Modi's personality. And you know, this whole Gujarat success and all had been hyped so much that people began to believe that he'll really deliver goods. The second one was this anti-corruption campaign, which in my opinion discredited Congress's name very substantially. And third was this creeping Hindutva, which enabled a lot of people to rise above caste. And in UP, it made a big difference. Now, I agree with Sanghvi in this sense that there is consternation. I wouldn't say they have become rebels or turned against. A consternation that none of the Hindutva commitments in the manifesto is anywhere even being considered.
None of the commitments.
Not even, say, 370, we have gone the opposite direction. Ram Temple, there's no talk. Uniform Civil Code, there's no reference. Cow, fortunately, 1 or 2 states have acted, so so that is a dissatisfied crowd. But I also agree that general opinion in the country is that as yet there is no alternative to Modi.
Well, we have one sitting here. Manish, do you broadly agree? I mean, I like the tone this conversation is taking is, why did Modi win largely? You know, it's time to look at that 1 year, and does that still matter today?
Well, the fact is that he won, and the fact is that he got a majority. Now, that's a non sequitur. The question is, what has he done with the majority? And if you look at even dispassionately and in a non-partisan manner, the government seems to swing very tantalizingly between an E for effort and an F for failure. And the reason why I say that is, you see, if you look at it, social cohesion has completely gone for a toss. Dr. Swamy and his fellow travelers may be unhappy, or there may be consternation that they have not, or the government has not done what they wanted. But it is not for the lack of trying, because over the past 1 year, every effort has been made to try and somehow vitiate the atmosphere. Internal security is in shreds. You have Pakistan flags being waved openly. You have the Naxalites kidnapping 300 villagers the day the Prime Minister is in Dantewada. Economy, well, less said the better. It's plunged to the depths of nadir. If you look at the economic survey for the month of February 2015, out of 8 core sectors of the economy, 5 have recorded a negative growth. And insofar as international relations is concerned, well, the Pakistan or the Sharm el Sheikh moment of this government, as I call it, where Pakistan came rather early in the term. And finally, with China, well, it's a different ball game. In order to deal with China, first of all, you have to understand China. And I think that understanding is not there.
We have someone who understands China, yeah.
So in some, I guess, but you're right, as yet, there is a feeling that he should be given a longer rope. And insofar as alternatives are concerned, let us not forget that Mr. Narendra Modi also as an alternative emerged only in the last year of the UPA.
Jay, are you ready to give Modi the long rope that everybody here seems to give him?
I think the country is ready to give him a long rope because for somebody who has won the
Because
biggest
there's no
mandate,
alternative or because of Modi himself?
well, look, let's look at it this way. Candidate Modi set expectations very high. Although I agree with Dr. Swamy that part of the victory was because the UPA government in its last 2 or 3 years had more or less completely ceased to function. It was in rigor mortis and it was mired in lots of scandals. So that contributed, but do not take away anything from Mr. Modi's communication abilities and the fact that he didn't get picked by anybody in his party. The party had no option because he was getting traction with the voters of the country.
Correct.
So irrespective of whether his party's right wing or centrist wing or left wing supports him or not, he had traction with the voters. Now if you look at what's happened, I don't think anybody except a spokesperson of the largest opposition party would say that his foreign policy has been a failure. I think by all accounts, his foreign policy has been an outstanding success. He has taken...
You're giving him an A+.
Certainly. And he has taken elements of previous governments' ideas that had remained ideas and implemented them, but he has also brought about his own idea. For example, this massive engagement with our diaspora is, has been talked about for a long time, but never anything has been done about it. And the way that he's changed India's image abroad is having a tremendous impact. If you look at, then if you transit to the next issue, which is the domestic economy, which is what people had expected he would focus on.
Right.
Yes, Indian businessmen are probably not as excited because they had had much higher hopes. But if you probe further, very few people have analyzed what a prime minister can do until and unless he has a majority in both houses.
Okay, let me bring Vir in this. Vir, do you think Modi is handicapped by the lack of majority, or is he really not focusing on the domestic agenda?
Well, I think prime ministers fall into 2 categories. There are tinkerers who look at an economy like a train that's running and say, we'll keep it on the tracks, we'll be all right, and we'll go fast and we'll get to this station early. And there are structuralists who blow up the train and build an airport instead. Modi, we all thought would be a structuralist, that there would be big bang reforms, he would change the way in which India is run. Where we were wrong is that he's turned out to be a tinkerer. And judged as a tinkerer, he's done well on some things, badly on some things. Overall, I think he's done okay. But the expectation was that he was a structuralist.
He's shaking his head.
No,
So
I respectfully disagree with Vir, because again, this does not address the issue of how do you bring about paradigm shifts, fundamental changes, without being able to pass legislation in both houses. Now, if you look at what has passed, in terms of the economic bills that have passed, it has been the most significant economic legislation in a decade. And in terms of the effort that he is putting forward, you may disagree with some of the efforts such as on land, but there is no lack of effort. Now, clearly his first priority was foreign policy during the first 6 or 8 months of his term. But the focus
17 foreign trips.
I think, I don't think we should see that as a negative. I think it was necessary to rebuild India's image. And today, if you take a straw poll, at least on economic commentators, you'll find most foreign commentators still see the glass as half full for India. And I think it's largely because of this outreach abroad. It's only domestic commentators who had maybe higher expectations. And I think you ought to allow 2 or 3 years for some of these efforts to bear fruit.
Dr. Swamy, I'm going to bring him, but first I want to ask Manish one question which I picked up from his. Rebuild India's image abroad. Wasn't Manmohan Singh the better brand ambassador? He already had an image abroad.
Look,
Is Modi building his own image?
First of all, let me reply to what Jay had said about not having a majority in the upper house of parliament. See, the raison d'etre of any parliamentary system is that the government has to walk that extra mile to build a consensus. So therefore, to turn around and say that because we don't have a majority and therefore there is a certain degree of dysfunctionality, I think is a contradiction in terms. B, I do not agree with this entire diaspora approach. With all due respects, I think it's going to be counterproductive in the long run, for the simple reason that imagine if the Prime Minister of Nepal tomorrow decides to fill up the Indira Gandhi Indoor Stadium and generally hold forth on all and sundry, or the Prime Minister of Bangladesh was to come here and maybe collect 1 million Bangladeshis, legal and illegal, in the boat club, and then celebrate the land boundary agreement. I think you and all your fellow anchors, will go red in the face, screaming about how it's an assault on India's sovereignty. So I don't think it is correct to stretch the patience of your host beyond a particular point. And the manner in which it has been happening, I'm sorry, we may have our domestic differences. There may be, the opposition may hold a certain perception about the previous government, but you do not go to Canada and you do not go to China and then try and make a song and dance about it. Ultimately, you are only hurting the image which you think that you are trying to build. So therefore, there is a complete contradiction in terms.
Let's ask Dr. Swamy if he's ashamed of being an Indian.
Well,
were you ashamed? Now it's okay. But
Now your government's in power.
I think that's overdone, actually. In fact, Manish Tewari should remember that WikiLeaks spoke about how Mr. Rahul Gandhi told the US.
Wondering when he'll bring Rahul Gandhi in the discussion.
it took 15 minutes.
He told the US political attaché that the RSS and Hindu terror was more dangerous than Lashkar-e-Taiba. I don't think these remarks should be torn out of context. But let me say one thing for Modi. There are some steps he took. In the beginning, we were critical. But today, we think that in the national interests, we have benefited. Take, for example, this alliance with PDP.
Which he has just criticized.
Yes.
Oh,
we have a deputy chief minister there and several ministers. We have got access to so much information that we never had before. And therefore, I think, and now it's also settling down in the sense that Mufti is much less extreme in his speech. So it's maybe he'll pull it off. And if you pull it off, then of course there's a great propaganda victory that the Muslims and Hindus have come together to rule Kashmir. So I think really 1 year is too short, and perhaps Delhi is a very strange place, and you come totally, having never worked in Delhi, it is. Some adjustment period has to be given to him. I would rather judge him more closely after 2.5 years than now.
I think Delhi is a strange place. I'll just take him literally and talk about the Delhi Assembly. Wasn't that the first wake-up call really that Modi needs to get things right?
I think so. I think that second constituency we talked about, people who said that Modi would change everything, they began to feel that perhaps he's not delivering, and they looked for an alternative. The thing about Modi is that every time you want to praise him, you can't really do that without referring to UPA2. You refer to UPA2 and you say there were scams, there was policy paralysis, nothing happened, and you say under Modi all of that is gone, which is, I think, true. But 1 year on, should you still be referring to UPA2? Judged against the UPA2, which was many minuses, lots of positives, but judged from zero, not a lot of positives. And if you're going to say the problem is the Rajya Sabha, that's absolutely right. But hey, he knew this, no? We didn't know what the Lok Sabha victory was going to be, but we knew what the composition of the Rajya Sabha was. So at the time he went around making these rash promises, he knew exactly what the problem was going to be. So why did he make these promises?
No, may I add two things here? See, first of all, I think this Rajya Sabha's importance is overrated.
One thing you and Jaitley agree on.
No, he's from Rajya Sabha. No. In the first year, there could be a lot of things for which you don't need a vote in the Rajya Sabha. Tax changes. Now, that's where we are getting real flack. Same thing as on some of the draconian measures on black money. It's being received very badly. Raising prices of petrol.
You're the one who says they don't do enough on black money.
I do, but this is not about black money. This is in case you are caught with black money, what should be done to you, not to bring it back. The methods of bringing it back are in my petition to the Supreme Court. So these are some of the areas where you don't need a vote of the Rajya Sabha. And we have focused too much on legislation.
We need to take a quick break, but don't go away. Come back and we're going to continue this discussion on Modi's 1 year in government. We are discussing Prime Minister Narendra Modi's 1 year in government. But Jay, how would you feel if he does what he's planning to do and holds a joint session to pass some of the bills? Won't then you say that he's bullying his way through? There's less consensus and more bullying.
Look, over the past 67 years, on average, more than 10 ordinances are passed every year, and joint sessions have been held before to do and undo laws. So it's nothing, anything that's constitutionally permitted should be seen in that light rather than bullying or caving in. But I want to address the issue that, look, without having a majority in the Rajya Sabha, it's difficult to bring in sweeping changes. But what has happened should not be undermined, because again, Manish was talking about reaching out to the opposition. Look at the bills that have passed, whether it's insurance, coal, or minerals auctioning. They all have had opposition support to some extent. BJD, for instance, we don't support them on the government on everything, but because of some of our concerns having been assuaged, we have supported on some bills. So that is already happening. And you've asked a very pertinent question, what happens now? Let's look forward. Look at what the predictions are. We are at a historic turning point where India's economic growth rate is now going to be going ahead of China. That's, everybody is consistently now predicting that by the year forward, year ahead of us, we are looking at just under 8% growth rate for India, which is almost back to what we used to have for several years under both NDA and UPA governments. And China has begun to start slowing down, something that has been predicted falsely many times in the past, but it seems to be happening now. So this puts us at a historic vantage point. We need to do more to ensure that millions of jobs are created. And unless we push through even more economic packages in Parliament, these jobs are not going to get created.
Manish, what should he focus on? What should Modi focus on in the coming year? What would you like him to be focused on?
Well, the first thing is that with due respects to Jay, I don't agree with the economic math, because if you look across the UPA years from 2004 to 2014, you did an average of about 7.75% in terms of growth, despite an economic meltdown and a Eurozone crisis. And those numbers do not square up to the earlier UPA term of NDA term of 1998 to 2004. So therefore, notwithstanding all the rhetoric about policy paralysis, etc., this government got very sound fundamentals in terms of an economy to take off on. What worries me is the absolute and abject slowdown in the agriculture sector. Agriculture in the February of 2015, as compared to the previous February, grew by only 1.1%. So therefore, there is a general spectre which is not only being articulated by us, which is also being articulated by Dr. Swamy's colleague, Mr. Arun Shourie, that the economy is cruising for a bruising. You know, it is completely and absolutely directionless. And so therefore, under those circumstances, these comparisons with China and the 8% that Jay talks about is probably at the adjusted prices of 2011, 2012. I do not think, given the size of the Chinese economy and the size of the Indian economy, is a fair comparison. To your question, what he should focus upon, I think the first thing that he should focus upon is restoring a semblance of social cohesion in this country, which subterraneanly is under a very severe strain.
I cannot resist saying this, you know, taking nothing away from Manish's brilliance in speaking for the Congress. He's used averages in a very, very interesting way. If you take the average of Congress results of all the 16 Lok Sabhas, they would still be in government today. But what the government inherited was less than 4.5% growth rate. I agree with you, the social cohesion is very, very important. I think if you look at what has happened in the last 1 year, there have been some elements within the governing party that have spoken rashly, but they have not been major figures, and they've been put in their place by the leaders in this government. And many of the accusations of minorities being targeted have turned out to be not quite the case. So I think the judgment is still out on that.
Well, I would also add that more than the agricultural performance. It's really the manufacturing sector which has just not improved, and that's because
despite Make in India and
no, that's fine, but you know, you have such a high interest rate and it's being jacked up. I think you talk to any businessman, he says it's impossible to make money. In fact, of the top corporates today, say take the top 10 corporates, their profit they are making doesn't cover the what they call as amortization, that is the principal and the interest that you have to pay on past loans. I think we need therefore to generate certain enthusiasm, and that can be done by reducing interest rates, which means you need a new Reserve Bank governor, and two major incentives in form of tax reduction, which I would go to the extent of saying it should be, in fact, income tax should be abolished. Then you would generate an enthusiasm, rate of savings will go up, and then manufacturing will take off. And manufacturing has to take off, otherwise semi-skilled workers will not get jobs. The unemployment figures actually are quite alarming.
See, the reality of the Indian economy is that the $2 trillion foreign formal economy floats on $2 trillion of a black economy. That's the reality, or a non-formal economy. The manner in which this government is going about doing things, maybe for the right reason, in the short run is going to completely kill the retail trade and various other sectors, rather than finding a modus vivendi of mainstreaming what is the non-formal economy. This government seems to have adopted a completely police and a danda kind of an approach.
We finally, will you sum up the last word, and what do you think Modi should do?
No, I'm not even going to get into the economic stuff, we've heard enough about it, but let's just look at the psychological position of the Prime Minister and the big picture. Whenever Prime Ministers are elected, they're usually remembered for what they do in their first year. Vajpayee did the nuclear explosion in his first year. Narasimha Rao liberalized the economy in his first year. Rajiv Gandhi did the accords with the Sikhs, with the Mizos, with the Nagas in his first year. He tried to solve the Sri Lankan problem. Indira Gandhi did bank nationalization, privy purses when she came into her own. My worry with Modi is that when his political capital was at its highest, he didn't do anything structural, didn't do anything big bang. He contented himself with tinkering, and we can argue about how successful that tinkering was. With each passing day, I think his political capital is being eroded. When Modi was elected, he was seen as this formidable figure. Amit Shah was seen as this invincible election-winning machine. Well, a year from now, guess what? They're not seen as being quite so invincible or quite so formidable. Who knows what's going to happen in Bihar, but it could go either way. There are already voices within the party which suggest that the party is not as much in awe of him as it once was. The lower your political capital, the less your ability to make changes. And that, I think, is going to be Modi's problem.
Well, that's all we have time for now. Thank you for watching this edition of Cover Story. We'll see you again, same time next week.